Hey there, viewers. The public sees the glitz, the inspiration, the empire. But behind closed doors, Oprah's life is far more disturbing than anyone imagines. From hidden struggles to dark secrets kept out of the spotlight, the truth behind her story is only now starting to surface. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Clipboard Girls Return. They didn't even put a name on the envelope, just a cheap manila one, slid through the mail slot in my apartment door sometime between the night I ordered Thai food and the morning I woke up to a dying humidifier and a dead plant. No sender, no return address, just a tiny black dot drawn in Sharpie where the flap sealed shut. And inside, one single sheet of letterhead with the old Harpo Studios watermark. Faint, half-faded, like someone had scanned it from a memory. Position: temporary digitization contract. Location: Harpo Archives. Stage 2 sublevel. Start date: immediate. Box ID 1238. Do not transfer to open archive. There was no signature, just a printed name. Operations Admin. I'd seen that title before, on firing papers back when they still pretended I was just being let go for overstepping protocol. That was 2006. I'd been an intern then. Clipboard girl. The kind they sent to get tea or cover for someone in segment rehearsal when audience members fainted from the lights. I still remembered the air there. Cold and dry, always recycled too much through the ducts, like they were preserving something underground. I should have thrown the letter out, but I didn't. 2 days later, I was standing in front of a door I wasn't supposed to know existed anymore. Stage 2 had been shut down since 2012. Torn posters still clung to the corridor walls, curling at the edges like they were trying to forget themselves. I had to use the side entrance. They'd changed all the locks upstairs. The elevators still worked, though, if you knew the right combination. Down, up, down, pause, down again. That was a rumor from the old interns, a code we weren't supposed to test. I remembered trying it once, just to see. It hadn't worked. Now it did. I felt the vibration in my legs before the door even opened. That low hum of machines still plugged in, still waiting, like something breathing behind the walls. The sublevel was darker than I remembered. No buzzing fluorescence, just rows and rows of black shelves with tape boxes stacked so high you'd need a ladder to even see the labels. The shelves were tagged with year ranges: 1984, 1991, 2003, each tagged in thick red marker. Some were crossed out. Some had nothing written at all. At the far end of the room, I found box 1238. The sticker was peeling off the side and barely hanging on. Playback, do not transfer, in blocky, faded print, and someone had drawn a circle around it in blue pen. A shaky, uneven hand. I dragged it to the digitizing table, powered up the VCR deck, and just sat there for a second, staring at that one tape on top. The one sitting there like it had been waiting for me. Mirror Rehearsal, 1993. That made no sense. I wasn't even hired until 2006, but something about the handwriting on the label, it looked familiar, like my own. I slid the tape in, hit play, and the screen flickered, static first, then the unmistakable hum of analog tape finding its track. The first image came slowly, like someone was turning the lights on behind the glass. A dressing room, soft pink walls, the back of a vanity mirror, lights buzzing slightly at the edges, no one in frame at first. Then movement. It wasn't Oprah, it was me. Except I looked younger, not by much, but definitely younger than I am now, and I was wearing that stupid white cardigan I only wore during my first internship week. The one with the tear in the left sleeve I always tried to hide under my clipboard. It walked across the frame. Calm, confident even, like I belonged there. I stopped in front of the mirror, staring into it. But here's the thing. I don't remember that moment. I've never been in that room, at least. I don't think I have. I never saw that wall color before. That vanity set. That chair with the little tear in the leather armrest. It meant nothing to me, but I was there, and I was looking straight at the mirror like I expected something to look back. Then I turned to the camera, and I smiled, and the audio cut out. At first I thought it was a glitch, but then the tape started playing something under the silence. Low-pitched whispering. It sounded like it was coming from under the table. It was backward, garbled, but layered like multiple voices. I paused the tape. The image froze. Me, half smile, staring out like I knew exactly what I was doing. And I sat there for I don't know how long, just staring at myself, trying to remember if this was some weird rehearsal footage or a prank. But who would go through that trouble? Who would have had access to a camera back then, let alone the keys to the editing room? And if I had been in that room, why didn't I remember? Then the rules started coming back to me, the ones whispered between interns. Stupid rules, but we followed them like superstition. Never use the green stairs. Don't look at the rehearsal cue cards after lights out. Don't write down what the guests say during warm-up, that's for her ears only. And the one I broke. Back in 6, during a post-show cleanup, I slipped into the backstage hallway after a segment ran long. I was looking for someone, I don't remember who. I passed the main dressing room, saw the light on, and just peeked inside, just for a second. Oprah wasn't there, but her vanity was, covered in thick notes, handwritten pages, lipstick tubes labeled with dates, not shades. I saw one open drawer. Inside, a small pair of white gloves. They were children's size. And on top of them, a sticky note, in block letters. Argesel pain, do not shift. I closed the drawer. I never told anyone. The next morning I was pulled into HR. They said someone had reported me for privacy violations. I was let go that day. No ceremony, no chance to argue. And now, I was watching a tape from 1993 of me, walking through a hallway I never walked, wearing a cardigan I thought I lost, looking into a camera I didn't know existed. This wasn't just weird, it was impossible. I hit eject, but the tape didn't come out. The VCR buzzed, the tray clunked but didn't open. The screen flashed white, then black again, then static. But not empty static. There was shape to it. The outlines of a hallway, the green stairwell. I could see the staircase clearly. The one we were told never to use. A figure was standing at the top, holding a clipboard. I killed the monitor, yanked the power cord, sat there with my heart pounding in my throat, because the last thing I saw before the screen went dark wasn't just the clipboard. It was the badge clipped to my shirt, and it had my name on it. But the date? The date was 1992, a full year before I even graduated. I don't know what's in the rest of that box. I don't know who sent the letter or who authorized me to come back, but I do know one thing. Whatever this is, it didn't start when I was hired. It started before the interviews, before the show, before the audience, before any of us knew we were watching. And somehow I was already part of it. Chapter 2, The Basement That Wasn't on Blueprints. You know how they always say retirement gives you peace? That quiet kind of drifting, where your mornings are slow and your memories finally get time to settle? That's a lie. At least it was for me. When you've spent 20 years dragging a mop across the same echoing tiles, wiping fingerprints off the same glass doors, watching the same crew of 2 perky producers with their headsets and empty coffee cups, peace doesn't come after. What comes is noise, echoes, stuff you pushed down deep while the machines were still running. That's what came back. Especially when the call came. Wasn't even from a number I recognized, just a voice. Young guy, polite, said they were doing some structural review on the old Harpo lot, part of a city-approved redevelopment thing. Claimed they were looking into foundation issues. Said I used to work there. Said they had my number from an old contractor file. Thought you could help us identify a room, he said. Room B7. There's no official record of it, but we found something. I almost hung up right then. My heart skipped like an old engine trying to turn over. B7. God, I hadn't thought about that hallway in years. Back when I started in '93, the basement levels already had a kind of hum to them. A mechanical hum, yeah. But also something else, like the building itself had lungs, breathing slow. You'd hear it late in the shifts, when the last of the crew had gone home and the air stopped pretending to move. Just that still, thick quiet, with a sound behind it, a rhythm you didn't want to sync with. Room B7 was always just there. A door halfway down the service corridor behind stage 2. Metal frame, always locked, always cold. Had a sign taped to the front, closed set, do not enter. In Sharpie, not even printed, the kind of thing you'd expect to be temporary, except it never came down. Every time I cleaned that hall, I skipped it. We all did. You just didn't open that door. One time, I asked Martine, the old overnight security guy, what was in there. He didn't look up from his paper, just said, "Some doors get locked for a reason. Don't knock twice." So when this young guy on the phone tells me they just found room B7 during a dig, like it wasn't ever on the plans, I couldn't say no. I knew I should have. I was almost 70, for God's sake. My knees had opinions every time I stood up. But I needed to see it one last time, maybe to confirm it was nothing. Maybe to prove to myself I hadn't made it all up in my head. They let me in through the south gate. The place was hollowed out now. No signage, no buzz, just echoes. Like Harpo had never been full of people. Like it had always been empty. The floor around stage 2 had shifted over the years, settling or something, and one of the construction guys said they'd found a concrete seam that didn't match the architectural files. When they drilled it open, it revealed a hallway sealed behind a false wall, and at the end of it, they found the door. Room B7. I stood there, staring at it. Same door. Same damn handwritten sign. But the paper didn't look yellowed with age. It looked new. The kid looked at me like he wanted a story, but all I said was, that door wasn't supposed to open. We opened it anyway. Inside it was freezing, not cold like winter, cold like time had stopped moving, like whatever heat had been in the world didn't want to enter. The room was square, maybe 15 by 15, and every single wall, every inch was tiled in mirrors, not fancy decorative ones, cheap rectangles, like the kind you get from dollar stores, glued on in a patchy, uneven grid. Some cracked, some warped. The ceiling had one thing hanging from it. An old-style microphone, not plugged into anything, just dangling, slightly spinning from the air displacement when we walked in. It creaked like a noose. And on the floor, in the far corner, was a wooden crate. Looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, but it wasn't dusty. It was clean. Too clean. We opened the lid. Inside were photographs. Polaroids, most of them burned around the edges. One had a lipstick smear across the face. Another showed a woman in a guest chair, eyes rolled back. Behind her, in the reflection of the studio glass, someone was standing with one hand raised, like they were directing the shot. But no one was supposed to be in that room during taping. The reflection didn't match the room's layout either. The camera angle was impossible. Next, there were cue cards. Not the printed kind. These were handwritten, rushed, smudged red like someone wrote them in lipstick. One said, "Ask her what hurts when she remembers." Another, "Read. Rehearsal cycle 4, witness not stable." Then we found a stack of contracts, legal release forms. Every name was blacked out, redacted with heavy marker, but one form had a name untouched. Denise Marlon, guest 447, taping date listed as May 1996. I remember Denise. She was one of the segments I helped clean after. Didn't even air, far as I recall. I remember because that was the day one of the audience ladies fainted twice in the green room. Denise never came back out after the taping. Producers told the audience she'd left early due to emotional exhaustion. But she didn't leave. She died 2 weeks later. Car crash on Lakeshore. Or that's what the papers said. Except on the form in my hand, her name wasn't listed as past tense. It said, Denise Marlon agrees to playback integration and audience substitution. Witness consent acknowledged. Confirmed. Infirmed. Not signed, not dated, just confirmed. I backed out of that room so fast I almost tripped over the door frame. My reflection in the mirror tiles blurred behind me, all those hundreds of fragments dancing like they were catching up to me. I turned back, just for a second, and saw something I still don't understand. It was already in the hallway, but so was my reflection. Still in the room, still looking into the mirror. It didn't move. I didn't blink, just watched me. I don't remember telling them I was leaving. Don't remember walking out past the gate. All I remember is the feeling, like something had reached out and touched the part of my memory I'd tried to forget, the part I thought was just old nightmares. Ghost noise from too many late shifts and not enough fresh air. But it wasn't a dream. Room B7 was real, and whatever it held, it had been rehearsed more than once. Don't think I was supposed to see it. Not now. Not back then. Maybe not ever. But that microphone in the ceiling, it wasn't for the guests. It was for us. And the thing it kept repeating, over and over, caught in its last breath of looped sound, wasn't an error. It was a warning. She isn't rehearsing, she's remembering. And maybe the scariest thing? We all helped her do it. Chapter 3, Playback Testimony, 233. I wasn't supposed to touch anything outside the digitize first pile, but after 3 straight days of redacting sponsor correspondence and scanning old audience liability waivers from 1995, my brain felt like oatmeal. Everything started to blur together. Confetti budgets, light cue charts, even Oprah's old Harpo lunch orders. All of it perfectly preserved in these manila folders like the studio hadn't been mothballed a decade ago. The temp job had come through an old court transcription volunteer list. I'd done a summer at the county archives back in college, tape decks and transcript formatting, nothing fancy. Just enough experience to earn an email invite for a legacy compliance digitization contract. No real job title. Just a door code and a key fob mailed to me in a black envelope. The Harpo back office didn't look like anything on Google. This wasn't the glossy studio with Oprah's face beaming from the lobby wall. It was behind that through a freight entrance, 2 stairwells down, then left at a steel door marked HR, closed. Inside was a single flickering desk lamp and a pile of banker boxes stacked like gravestones. No windows, no Wi-Fi, just me, a digitization terminal, and a heavy silence that made you feel like you were working in a museum that didn't want to be visited. At the bottom of the 3rd stack, under an unmarked cardboard lid, I found it. A thin white sticker on the side. Testimony, Playback Session 233, Vault Only. Not a sponsor file, not a financial form. I opened it with both hands like I was peeling back something brittle. Inside was a full printed transcript, bound in black spiral with the pages yellowed at the corners. The front page was blank except for one line in faded ink. Interview.ow+, March 19, 1994. Witness status, unscheduled. I didn't even hesitate. I sat down and started reading. It began like most transcripts. Interviewer name, respondent name, date, timestamp. But both names were redacted, only the initials OW repeated after each Q. The first dozen pages were hesitant. The woman they were interviewing, young, mid-20s maybe, spoke in fragmented sentences, emotional, inconsistent. She kept asking where the cameras were, and Oprah kept telling her there weren't any, only this one mic, only her. Then, around page 7, the woman began to talk about her childhood. We didn't know it was training, not at first. We were told it was etiquette school, a scholarship thing. We learned posture, clapping, voice control. We had to learn how to laugh without covering our mouths. They said we'd grow up to be audience members, the good kind, the kind that could cry on cue. But we weren't supposed to know who the host was yet. We'd practice for hours, pretending we saw something beautiful. That was the word they used, beautiful. But none of us knew what it was. I blinked and read that part again. Audience members. Trained. I looked around the room like someone was going to walk in and tell me this was a prank. But the silence just stretched, thick and unmoving. On page 12, the woman mentioned something called the glove room. You couldn't go in unless you were invited, and you had to bring a question with you, not something dumb. It had to hurt. The walls were covered in hands, like mannequin hands, dozens of them. Each one held a slip of paper, and you had to wear one. That's how she knew you were ready. I turned the page. Page 13 was missing. Just gone. Torn out clean, not even a staple remnant. The hole where the spiral binding would have passed through was smooth, like it had never existed. Page 14 picked up mid-thought. The one I wore said, I was never allowed to grieve. It was written in blue ink, smelled like rosewater. She smiled when she read it. Said I was almost there. Then she asked me what pain I could wear. I didn't understand what she meant. She said some pain is too fresh to hold, so you wear it instead. On your face. In your claps. That's when I stopped being a girl. And I never left. The transcript ended a few pages later. Oprah never interrupted her. Never asked follow-up questions. Just let her talk. At the bottom of the final page, one word was typed in bold. Unread. My stomach turned. I checked the box again, desperate for context. Maybe a production note, an editing log, anything. Just a folder of metadata. But all I found was a yellow sticky note stuck beneath the bottom flap. It was barely stuck on anymore. Faded ink, thin paper. One sentence. Witness, playback begins when the pain repeats. My fingers tingled holding it. I looked back at the transcript and reread the line. She asked me what pain I could wear. And suddenly, I remembered something I'd completely forgotten. In college, my roommate once made fun of me for clapping like I was on a soundstage. She said it looked rehearsed, too symmetrical, like I was marking a cue. I'd laughed, brushed it off, but now, I couldn't remember where I'd learned that. Who taught me to clap like that? Or when? I remembered a girl in our dorm who always had red gloves, said it was a family thing. She once asked me what the worst thing I ever remembered was. Not felt, remembered. Then she said, that's a good one to wear. Never saw her again after freshman year. I put the transcript back in the box, closed the lid, sat still for almost 20 minutes, watching the digitizer light blink in the dark. I felt like if I moved, the room would change shape. Like, if I looked away, the walls would mirror me back wrong. Later that night, I tried searching for Playback Session 233 online. Nothing. No mentions in legal databases, no guest lists, no official tapes, not even among the fan archivers who kept every episode breakdown in spreadsheets. It never aired. It wasn't even scheduled. But someone wanted it preserved. And if what she said was true, about underground etiquette schools and training pain, then some part of that woman's life was built to be background, built to be seen and not noticed, a living applause track. And now I wonder how many others wore gloves, or worse, how many of us still are without even realizing it. Yeah, not me. I went back the next day. The sticky note was gone. Only thing left inside the box was one red thread. Thin, frayed, exactly the kind they used to stitch gloves with. Chapter 4, the editor's cut that wasn't his. I was the last person they let in his house. Not because he was dangerous or anything, but because he didn't open the door for people anymore. The kind of recluse you only hear about when they die, and the news says something like, former employee of major network, found surrounded by boxes. But he was alive, still breathing, still surrounded by those boxes. His name wasn't on any current Harpo paperwork, but one of the old production managers passed me his address after a long pause, scribbled on the back of a diner napkin like she wasn't supposed to write it down. When I asked why she still had it, she said, because he never gave the tapes back. His apartment was in Detroit, 4th floor of a crumbling building above a closed pawn shop. I had to knock 4 times before I heard anything. Then a shuffle, a soft scraping behind the door. When it opened, it wasn't fear I saw in his eyes. It was like he recognized me, and not in the, oh, you must be from the studio kind of way. It was like he'd seen me on a screen. You're late, he said. He let me in without asking my name. The place was heat-choked and dim, blinds sealed shut with layers of duct tape. Stacks of VHS tapes lined the walls like bricks, each labeled in pencil. Pulpy playback. Don't render, not her smile. There were no photos, no books, no signs of regular life. Just tapes, and a machine in the corner that hummed low, almost like it was dreaming. He told me his name, but not until after I sat down. Told me he used to cut Oprah's specials. Mostly the mid-2000s stuff, celebrity interviews, redemption arcs, the big moments where she'd sit close, nod slow, tilt her head like a god listening with grace. Then came the fray fallout. Everything changed after that, he said, voice hoarse from not being used much. The producers wanted more breakdowns, more redemption. Crying was gold. The messier the truth, the cleaner the narrative. He leaned back and lit a cigarette with a trembling hand. There's one guess, he said. Didn't make it to air. And I don't mean pulled at the last second. I mean, never logged. No metadata, no clearance. It shouldn't exist, but I have it. He told me the taping happened in a secondary studio, one they stopped using because the lights always buzzed on audio pickup. The guest was a young man, 28, maybe 30, came in shaking, not because of nerves, but because he said he'd been told she wanted to see him again. He told the producers he'd escaped from a celebrity compound, said he'd been passed around, used, filmed, and drugged. Said it wasn't just the people in the compound who scared him, it was what they worshipped, a kind of rehearsed trauma, repeated over and over for cameras. Ellie said, if I tell anyone, the man said, I'll wake up on the screen, and it won't be me talking. The interview began with Oprah smiling, that soft, slow smile people always called motherly. But the man, he froze. It's happening again, he whispered. She's smiling. Don't let her smile. Don't let her smile. He began sobbing uncontrollably, not the kind of tears that win Emmys, the kind that ruins sound takes, raw, animal crying. His mic picked up wheezing. Then he looked straight into the lens and said, "Don't let her wear it again, please. That's not her face." The cameras were shut down after 11 minutes. Producers pulled him out. No segment aired, no mention made. But the tape, the editor kept it. I tried to erase it. he said, gesturing to a locked cabinet in the corner. Tape wouldn't delete. I re-recorded over it 3 times. Every time I played it back, I got different footage. He swore the playback wasn't consistent. One time, the man wasn't even on the tape, just the sound of clapping, slow and steady, with Oprah sitting in an empty chair nodding at no one. Another time, the screen was a black room lit only by a spotlight on the guest's chair, and he was standing behind it, watching himself. But the worst was the 3rd playback. She looks at the camera, he said. Smiles. But it's not her. I swear it's not. I paused the frame. Zoomed in. The eyes don't match. The mouth moves, but it's like it's sinking to something I didn't hear. Like the smile was dubbed in. He handed me a tape, dusty, unlabeled, except for a strip of masking tape with Confession 243. Chevalier. I haven't played this one since 2014, he said. I think it's the last one I cut before I quit. I asked him why he kept it. He didn't answer for a long time. Then finally, because sometimes the edit isn't yours. Sometimes the machine edits you. I took the tape home that night. I shouldn't have. Something in me screamed not to. But I was already too deep in. Too many missing pages, too many mirrored rooms and vanishing gloves, and testimony transcripts that knew things I hadn't told anyone. Had an old converter deck hooked up to my laptop, slid the tape in, waited. The screen blinked. Yeah, the Chevalier sat in a chair, fidgeting. Blurry at first, the camera struggled to find his face in the dim lighting. Oprah was beside him, but not facing him. She was angled just off camera, like she was waiting for a cue. Then she turned. It smiled. He flinched. She's wearing it again, he said. That's not her face, she promised me. The audio glitched. His voice slowed, dragged, reversed, then played forward again. The feeling. I said my pain out loud once. She remembered it better than I did. The picture began to flicker. Oprah's body didn't move, but her face started shifting. Barely at first. A twitch in the cheek, a widening of the smile. Then it began to melt, her expression changing every second, cycling through sorrow, delight, rage, confusion, like someone testing masks. Chevalier looked into the camera and said, "She wore my memory." Then she clapped for it. The footage skipped. And for just a single frame, the face on screen wasn't his anymore. It was mine, staring into the camera, expression blank, wearing the same hoodie I had on in that very moment. I slammed the laptop shut, unplugged the deck, sat still for an hour. I haven't opened the tape again since. I keep it in a drawer. The editor hasn't answered my calls. I called the production manager again, the one who gave me his address, and she just said, "You shouldn't have gone in there." But it's too late now, because now I understand what the confession loop really is. It's not about watching someone tell the truth. It's about watching someone else remember your truth before you do. And once you see it, the tape doesn't need to play anymore. He did. Just wait. Inside you. Chapter 5. The Silence Room. They told us the boxes would be labeled, but none of them were. Just rows of beige containers with black tape over where the old logos used to be. I recognized the layout, though. I had walked these halls once, barefoot in morning fog, wearing a blue sweater too big for my frame, clutching my book like it was armor. That was 15 years ago. Now, I wore a government badge and archival gloves, and they called me ma'am. The storage wing wasn't part of the original school. This was the embassy annex, constructed after the transition, when Oprah's Leadership Academy underwent its first restructuring. There had been whispers of lawsuits, curriculum rewrites, even a full psychological audit. None of it ever made the news. But the documents had been quietly transferred, sealed, and forgotten here in Johannesburg behind a keypad door and a flickering overhead bulb. The door clicked behind me. I was alone. Started with the student files. Mine was in there too, though it was thinner than I expected. One report, one photo, one sentence under behavioral notes. Compliant. Responds well to echo, whatever that meant. But what stopped me cold was the reel. Not a tape, not a DVD, a real film reel, metal casing, label handwritten in pencil across a yellowing strip of paper. Intake, Year 1, First Impressions. I should have logged it and left it for senior staff, but something in me needed to see it. Not for work, for me. I threaded it into the embassy's projector room, still operational, barely, and sat alone in the dark as the bulb stuttered to life. The film crackled into view. Black and white, no audio. The first frame showed the campus as I remembered it. The iron gates, the stone path, the neat hedges cut to resemble spirals. Then it cut to the dormitory hallway. Camera low, moving slowly, almost reverent. Oprah appeared at the end of the corridor. She walked slowly, barefoot, wearing a loose white robe. Her hair was unstyled, no makeup. She didn't look at the camera. She was focused, completely, on the girls sleeping in the rows of twin beds. She moved from bed to bed, gently placing her hand on each student's forehead. Her mouth moved silently, like she was whispering prayers or questions. Some of the girls stirred. One smiled in her sleep. I leaned closer, tried to make out their faces. So many were familiar in that half-remembered way. Girls I used to study with, share toothpaste with, cry with. At times 33, 17, she touched the girl in the third bed from the end. I was awake, eyes wide open, staring up at her. No blink, no twitch, just watching. I don't remember that night. I don't remember ever pretending to be asleep. I don't remember her ever touching my forehead. But there I was, and I didn't look afraid, like I was waiting. I let the reel run, breath caught in my throat. The next scene was not dated, just a room. A square, windowless room with white walls and a single camera mounted in the corner. 10 girls sat in a row, dresses pressed, shoes lined up neatly beneath their chairs. In each of their laps, red gloves, identical, satin, unworn. They sat still, completely still. No one spoke, no one moved. Then, from the far left, a girl leaned forward slightly and whispered, "I never left." The other girls didn't react. She wasn't looking at the others. She was staring directly into the camera. I reached to pause the reel, but my hand shook. I looked down. The gloves I'd been wearing, the standard white cotton archivist gloves, they weren't white anymore. They were red, smooth, shimmering, and snug, like they'd been made for my hands. I ripped them off and threw them to the floor, heart racing. My skin tingled underneath, cold and damp, like they'd drawn something out of me. I picked up the original gloves from my bag, cotton, stained with handling dust. The red gloves weren't anywhere. The reel ended. Just cut to black, no credits, no fade out, just darkness and the sound of the projector's mechanical breath. I sat there long after the film stopped turning. Memories came, slow and uncertain. A flash of us being told to clap without clapping, a lesson in holding space where we had to sit in silence for 20 minutes and think about how we made Oprah feel seen. We called it morning gratitude, but the chants, yes, there were chants, were less about being thankful and more about being memorable. Presence is pain worn well, they used to say, over and over, like a mantra. I never understood it. Not until now. The silence room, that's what we call the soundproof chamber behind the auditorium, wasn't just for meditation. It was for rehearsing, practicing how to be still, how to be background, how to let someone else's emotion pass through you without breaking your expression. Empathy wasn't taught there, it was a sign. We wore gloves not to stay clean, but to hold grief without shaking. We were encouraged to think of ourselves as mirrors, reflecting only what we were told to reflect. And I had been good at it, very good. That night, I returned to the reel and rewatched the moment 33:17. My eyes were open. Oprah's hand hovered above my forehead, and for the briefest second, she paused. She smiled. Not warmly, not like she did on TV. That smile was different, like she'd found something. I realized, with a kind of bone-deep chill, that I wasn't the one watching her. She was watching me, and whatever she saw, she liked. I locked the reel back in its case, filed it under restricted visuals, wrote a false label, maintenance footage, discardable. I don't think I'll ever request access to it again, but sometimes, usually late at night, usually when I'm sitting too still, I feel my hands go cold, and I look down, and they're red again, only for a second, just long enough to remember, just long enough to wonder if I ever really left that room, or if it followed me here. Chapter 7. The Playback Room. I don't think people realize how much a filing room can hum. Not a real hum, not like electricity or some machine running quietly behind the walls. I mean a human hum, a presence, the sense that the pages around you still remember being read, that the air is thicker because it holds too much that's never been spoken out loud. That's the kind of hum I walked into the day they sent me to the Harpo Legal Annex. They called it a contract recovery project, something to do with the Apple documentary again. My job was simple: catalog any unscanned production agreements, pull duplicates, and flag any documents with what they called secondary witness clauses. They never explained what that meant. The Harpo Legal Archives were located underneath what used to be a dental billing firm. 3 stories below, one elevator ride past the keycard lock that squealed like it hadn't been swiped in years. The light overhead flickered. The walls had no windows, just rows of cabinets, metal humming slightly, like they knew I didn't belong. I signed in on the clipboard at the desk, but the previous sign-in was dated 2008. That was already enough to put my nerves on edge. But it wasn't until I hit the back row of the D-section drawer that I found the manila folder with no barcode, no record number, and no corporate seal. Just a phrase, centered at the top of the header page. Witness Performance Agreement, re. The Crown 1. I froze. No other contract I'd seen was titled like that. Standard documents used words like guest, talent, or participant. This wasn't any of those. This sounded ritualistic. I opened it carefully, keeping the edges straight under my gloves. The contents were not normal. There were NDAs, sure, but they weren't for staff or producers. These were for audience members. Each form had an eerily precise language clause, repeated in bold. By attending, you agree to be seen when unseen. You agree to respond when cued by silence. You agree to rehearse memory on behalf of the subject. The subject, not the host, not the subject. The names on the forms were blacked out, but each one was signed, dated, some from as early as 1992, others just scribbled with an X, like someone was forced to sign mid-panic. In one attached addendum, there was something that looked like a permissions clause, but I'd never seen anything like it. It said, in the event of emotional transfer, the host may temporarily reclaim memory fragments that do not originate from her own life. This is not a breach. This is sacred. This is rehearsal. I stopped there, because the word rehearsal had started showing up everywhere in these documents. It wasn't being used to describe pre-show logistics. It was always capitalized, like a title. Capital Rehearsal. I flipped to the last few pages and found something even stranger. A single sheet, laminated, no type, just a printed glyph in black ink, a sort of spoked circle intersecting a mirror line. In the center, an hourglass, missing its bottom half. I'd seen that symbol before. Once, back in college, in a screen grab of an Oprah Winfrey episode that got pulled from circulation within days. In the still, she's reaching for a book with her left hand. On her inner wrist, just below the bracelet, you can just make it out. That same glyph. The hourglass. Nobody ever commented on it. Fans chalked it up to jewelry glare. But it's here. Stamped. Official. And on the final page, in ink that shimmered like it had been applied recently, even though the paper was yellowed and dry, there was one final line. The host was not the show, you were. The words shifted in the light, like foil, like the sentence itself was breathing. I stepped back, genuinely unnerved. This wasn't a document anymore. It was a mirror. Not literal, not made of glass, but a mirror just the same. A reflection of something hidden under every episode we used to watch without thinking. The audience wasn't there to observe. They were there to absorb, to carry things. And Oprah wasn't just performing empathy. She was collecting it, rehearsing it, wearing it. I looked around the archive room, saw all the file drawers suddenly not as storage, but as containment. What were we keeping? What were we letting her remember that wasn't hers to begin with? And if she was allowed, legally permitted, to reclaim someone else's pain, who decided when she had to give it back? I closed the file, placed it in the do not scan bin. Thought I kept one page, just one. Not because I wanted a souvenir, because something in me needed proof. Proof that memory can be stolen, legally, neatly, through a contract you never really read because you just wanted to be in the audience that day. Proof that a smile cued on command can be binding. Proof that I once felt a silence I didn't understand, but stood up and clapped anyway. Now, when I sleep, I sometimes dream I'm seated in a studio again. That signature harp plays, lights warm on my skin, and I feel something tug from behind my eyes. Memory I don't recognize, but I smile, because I'm supposed to. And somewhere, far off stage, I swear I hear the glyph whisper, Witness confirmed. Playback resumes. Chapter 8. You were always the audience. There's a USB on your desk. You don't remember putting it there. You don't remember anyone handing it to you. There was no package, no label, no knock at the door. But there it is. Matte black. Clean, still cold to the touch. And etched along the side in barely visible red ink. Witness, viewer role, accepted. You tell yourself not to plug it in. You do it anyway. Your screen doesn't blink, doesn't flicker. It just begins. No file directory, no menu. Just a video that plays itself full screen, frame perfect. It starts with a hallway, not one you recognize immediately, but your stomach does. Your lungs do. It's the corridor from the Harpo basement, or maybe it's the hallway from that boarding school you once walked through in a dream. Or maybe it's your childhood bedroom, with the walls pulled farther apart than they should go. The footage moves. You're watching the playback now. Every chapter begins to replay, but differently. You don't see Oprah anymore. You see the rooms, you see the movements, the rituals, but she's gone. Or maybe she was never there. The janitor is still sweeping, but the mirror no longer reflects her. The transcriptionist still clutches the sticky note, but this time it has your name on it. The editor presses rewind again and again, but the face on the screen is yours, melting, flickering, glitching back into a still frame of your own blank stare. The girl from the academy whispers, "I never left," and her face lifts slowly, mouth twitching wider, and it's your voice that says it. Your breath gets shallow. The audio starts to shift. Not music, not dialogue. Applause. But it's wrong. Too distant. No rhythm, no pattern, no hands. Just the suggestion of applause, like a recording of a memory of a crowd. You look around your room. There your screen is still playing. Now it's the playback room. You're there, again. Or someone wearing you. You're watching yourself watch. On screen, Oprah appears, just once. Not in frame, not lit. She's looking into a mirror. A real one, and you realize you've never actually seen her direct, only reflected. Her mouth moves, and the voice, your voice, the only voice left, says, "I only held it, you believed it." Then the screen goes white. For too long. You think it's done, that maybe it froze. But a line begins typing across the whiteness, slowly. You watched. You rehearsed. You remembered. Then, after a pause that stretches so long it feels like the screen is waiting for permission. Now, playback begins. With you. You feel it before you see it. Your fingers trembling. Your palms damp. You look down, and it red gloves. They weren't there before, but now they are. Smooth, fitted, shimmering at the edges, like light can't decide if it should reflect or pass through. You try to pull them off, but your hands don't move. They're too busy clapping. One slow clap, then another, even though you don't hear anything, even though you're not smiling. The room around you starts to change. Walls stretch wider, corners blur. Oops appears behind you, empty except for rows of gloves. The air smells like old dust and lip gloss and hot lights. You recognize it now. The studio, the dorm, the courtroom, the hotel, all the same room, all layered on top of each other. Or back in the audience. Only this time there is no host. Only mirrors. Only playback. Only memory rehearsed so long it forgot who it belonged to. And you? You still watching? Still rehearsing? Still clapping on cue? Because you always were the audience. And you always will be.